Long ago, an era of conflict raged between humans and mystical creatures for a century. With both factions drained and the origins of their strife forgotten, an era of peace dawned, fostering coexistence between humans and these beings. Dr. Glenn Litbeit, a human dedicated to the care of these mystical entities, works alongside his assistant, Saphantite Saphenix, Alamia. After examining a pregnant female minotaur, Dr. Thulhi Squeal, Glenn's mentor and Ascilla, assigns him the task of conducting physical assessments on combatants within the city's arena. Among these fighters is Tizelia Scythia, a centaur and the sole heir to Scythia transportation. During her examination, she casually expresses a desire to find a partner akin to Glenn, inadvertently sparking a twinge of jealousy in Saphi. Tizelia's victory drought in battles puzzles Glenn, who discovers that her unwavering belief in her body's perfection prevented her from using steel shoes, resulting in uneven hooves that affected her balance. Despite Tizelia's reluctance, Glenn fits her with new shoes, enabling her to regain her winning edge. Contemplating the situation, Glenn ponders if Thulhi orchestrated this as a test of his ability to handle challenging patients. Saphi recounts her early encounter with Glenn during the war when, as a political captive, she was introduced to Glenn's father. They parted ways and met again later in their lives at the academy, both pursuing studies in monster medicine. One day, Glenn and Saphi venture to the Marrow Waterways, a marvel constructed by the dragon lady Scotty Dragenfeld. They encounter Lalala Hines, a mermaid singer offering her songs for sale. Despite her talent, Lalala struggles to complete a song, prompting Glenn to diagnose her with inflamed gills due to insufficient time spent in water. Lalala reveals her aspiration to perform at the Central Council Hall to support her family but currently sings at the waterways for their livelihood. A mishap occurs when a human child falls into the water, and Lalala, despite her condition, manages to rescue him. However, in the process, she inhales water, causing her to drown due to her inflamed gills. Glenn intervenes swiftly, resuscitating her by transferring air into her lungs through a kiss, allowing her gills to expel the water. After providing medication for Lalala's gills, she secures a permanent singing position at the council hall and develops feelings for Glenn. Sometime in the evening, a woman is chasing a bandit when she is ambushed. The next day, after Glenn and Saphi finish treating a slime girl, they are approached by Lady Scotty and her bodyguard, Kunai Zeno. Scotty asks if they can help locate and reattach Kunai's right arm. She then reveals that Kunai is a flesh golem. Once Scotty leaves, Kunai refuses Glenn's help due to her hatred of doctors, and she decides to look for her arm on her own. Outside, she notices another bandit and she follows them. Later, Glenn is out looking for Kunai's arm when he runs into Tizelia, who finds Kunai's leg. Examining the leg, Glenn notices the stitches are badly degraded. He then heads further into town where he runs into Lalala, who has Kunai's arm. Using the body parts to locate Kunai, Glenn reattaches them, despite her protests. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Saphi has a conversation with her friend Aranya Tarantara Arachnida. After Glenn is finished, Kunai thanks him. It is later revealed the bandits were watching. When Glenn returns to the clinic, Saphi tells him she believes that she is pregnant. Saphi reveals that she was actually hiding an abandoned harpy egg. Just then, several bandits attack the clinic. When they run into Kunai, she explains the bandits are slavers. They join Scotty and Lalala on the waterways where they are attacked by archers. Fortunately, Tizelia was nearby and she fights them. At the hideout, one of the harpies has an impacted egg from stress. While Scotty and Saphi fight the bandits, Saphi regrets hiding from Glenn that she has an incurable illness, and that her family specializes in assassination. As children, she was actually under orders to assassinate Glenn's family if the business deal fell through. During the battle, Saphi is poisoned and passes out. When she awakens, Glenn explains the slavers were arrested and the harpy laid her egg safely. Saphi decides to admit the truth to Glenn, who reveals he actually knew already. Saphi is so happy she attempts to seduce him, only to pass out again. Glenn agrees to hold her tail until she sleeps, like when they were children. Saphi hints that the incurable illness she suffers from might just be love. Glenn hires Tizelia to transport them to the Harpy village for the Harpy's medical checks. A rock slide injures Kay, one of Tizelia's attendants, so she is flown to the village by the Harpies where Glenn diagnoses her with a sprain. Lorna, Kay's childhood friend, becomes extremely distracted without Kay and almost ruins Tizelia's negotiations to employ the Harpies as air couriers. Worried, Tizelia asks Glenn to examine Lorna. Glenn struggles to know where to start as Lorna has a psychological issue. Saphi suggests that since Lorna grew up higher strung and more sensitive than Tizelia and Kay, she may feel useless without someone in charge. Glenn makes the strange decision to take all control away from Lorna, outfitting her with a blindfold and reins. Surprisingly, Lorna immediately feels better as she is more able to focus on her job, though Glenn privately thinks Lorna might simply enjoy being tied up. As thanks, Kay and Lorna try to seduce Glenn together, reasoning that if they sleep together, Tisalia would probably insist Glenn take responsibility by marrying her. Glenn is quick to refuse, but Kay and Lorna still hope Glenn becomes their master as well one day. After attending to Kay, Glenn, Sappy, and Tisalia make a visit to Illy. Glenn conducts an examination, concluding that Illy isn't unwell but simply undergoing a molting process. An irate Illy attempts to attack Glenn, only to be restrained by Tisalia. Later, when Tisalia catches up with Illy, a challenge is issued and a fight ensues. Tisalia later discloses her victory to Glenn and Sappy, presenting a feather lost by Illy during the skirmish. This prompts Glenn to seek assistance from Sappy and Tisalia for a task. The subsequent day, they gather a collection of feathers. As night falls, Illy reminisces about her previous ability to fly. When they catch up with her, Glenn unveils the reason behind her molting, explaining that she's developing her adult feathers due to her phoenix lineage, a revelation already known by Thulhi in Lindworm. In time, Illy ecstatically reveals her newly formed wings, now capable of flight once again. As Glenn holds one of her feathers, he notices its warmth, sparking speculation about Illy's proximity to the phoenix lineage. Meanwhile, Aranya pays a visit to the clinic to meet with Glenn. Just as Glenn and Sappy are about to head home, Illy shows up covered in a sticky substance. Glenn notices that it is Rachne silk. Heading to the forest, Glenn and Sappy run into Aranya, where she introduces herself to Glenn. Aranya reveals she is there to catch Illy so she can see her rainbow wings for herself. At the village, a very excited Aranya meets Illy. Meanwhile, Sappy and Tisalia get into an argument over Aranya. The following day, Sappy, Kay, and Lorna are at the hot springs. While this is happening, Aranya visits Glenn. Afterwards, she asks him to join her where she catches him in a trap. She wants to seduce him so she can be closer to Sappy. However, Tisalia arrives to stop her. Aranya states she and Tisalia are the same in terms of what they want. Just as they are about to fight each other, Sappy shows up. She tells them Glenn has no time for courtship. Later that night, Sappy tells Glenn she loves him. They are then interrupted when they hear tremors caused by a gigas. With the looming threat of the giant goddess approaching, Tisalia assumes leadership, orchestrating the village's evacuation and dispatching Illy to seek aid from Lady Scotty in Lindworm. Determined to confront the giant alone, Tisalia's solitary mission is intercepted by Sappy and Glenn, who notice her absence from the group. The situation escalates as Dion Nephilim, the giant, emerges, specifically requesting to meet Glenn. Simultaneously, in Lindworm, Scotty enlightens a distressed Illy about Dion. Glenn recognizes Dion's ailment as a head cold, offering her medication while enlisting Aranya's assistance in crafting warmer attire. The Harpies, particularly Illy, establish an amiable connection with Dion. Returning to Lindworm to reopen the clinic, Glenn extends an invitation to Tisalia for dinner. Amidst their dinner engagement, both Tisalia and Sappy assert their determination not to concede in their affection for Glenn. Shortly after, during the commemoration ceremony at the Marrow Waterways, Glenn discerns an anomaly with Scotty's tail. As Scotty addresses the gathering, she collapses unexpectedly. At Lindworm Central Hospital, Thulhi discloses to Glenn and Sappy that despite Scotty's robust dragon nature, she suffers from a rare, life-threatening condition, and Scotty herself displays no interest in seeking a cure. Later, Kunai implores Glenn to aid Scotty. Upon entering Scotty's chamber, Glenn finally hears Scotty's voice and is surprised to discover her appearance resembling that of a young girl. Reluctantly, Scotty consents to an examination, revealing a tumor affecting her chest, infiltrating her veins and disrupting her blood flow. She views this affliction as a form of retribution for her dragon ancestors' departure from the realm of gods and her actions during the Great War. Driven by compassion, Glenn seeks Thulhi's authorization to undertake a complex surgical procedure. Though initially hesitant, Thulhi consents upon hearing Glenn's heartfelt conviction, yet remains concerned about convincing Scotty and the necessity of an additional surgeon. Glenn approaches Aranya, appealing to her sewing expertise for repairing the damaged veins. Initially reluctant, Aranya agrees upon realizing she could don a nurse's uniform akin to Sappy's. Unfazed by the daunting task ahead, Glenn begins his meticulous preparations. Kunai's attempts to persuade Scotty for surgery yield no success. Meanwhile, Glenn visits the Kukla workshop seeking surgical tools and encounters Mime. As they stroll, Mime's lack of confidence becomes apparent. Upon reaching the boss, he assigns her the task of creating needles, much to her dismay. At the clinic, Aranya rehearses for the surgery with Kunai. Thulhi and Glenn inspect the newly crafted tools. While reviewing the needles in the drafting room, Mime becomes captivated by a spinning wheel. The following day, Illy rushes to the clinic informing Glenn of Mime's collapse. Diagnosing her with exhaustion and vertigo, Glenn tends to her and learns about her revised plan to create sturdier, finer needles, earning her commendation. With determination, Glenn sets off once more to persuade Scotty for the surgery, receiving well wishes from Sappy and Aranya. Glenn arrives at the Central Council Hall to convince Scotty to have the surgery. Meanwhile, Sappy, Aranya, and Tisalia have a girls' night out at a pub. When they return to the clinic, Sappy Harpy catches Aranya stealing a dragon scale. Attempting to flee, she is stopped by Tizalia and Saphi. Rather than turn her in to the authorities, Saphi and Tizalia have a heartfelt conversation with a surprised Aranya. They also reveal to Aranya that she has fallen in love with Glenn. Sometime later, Glenn catches up with Scotty where she explains why she refuses to have the surgery. However, when Glenn tells her that she deserves to live a happy life, Scotty decides to have the surgery after all. On the night of the surgery, Glenn, Thulhi, Saphi, and Aranya operate on Scotty, while all of Lindworm holds a vigil hoping for its success. The next morning, it is revealed that the surgery was a success and the city rejoices. After Scotty's surgery, she attends a ceremony and later arrives at the clinic. Meanwhile, Glenn tends to Saphi, who falls ill. Departing for a house call, Glenn coincidentally encounters Scotty and Kunai. When their carriage breaks down, Neem arrives and fixes it. In gratitude, Scotty gifts Glenn and Neem 2 large barrels of wine. Back at the clinic, Aranya cares for Saphi while Dion aids the Harpies at their village. Glenn returns and enlists Tizalia, Kay, and Lorna to transport the wine barrels. Within the clinic, Aranya playfully teases Saphi about Glenn and Illy and her companions visit, sharing food from their respective villages. Glenn arrives amid the gathering, receiving an abundance of food on his way home. Later that evening, a lively party ensues in the city. Monster Girl Doctor explores themes of acceptance, diversity, and the complexities of coexistence between different species. It offers a mix of medical drama, fantasy, and a touch of romance as Glenn forms connections with his patients and colleagues. The series also delves into the lore and biology of the various monster girls, offering insights into their cultures and backgrounds. Thank you for watching. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel because it is very important for the development of the channel.
Yeah!